Hello and welcome to eCommerce Matters, brought to you by BlackCurve. We help e-commerce businesses make pricing decisions. In today's podcast, we've gone back into the archives and have pulled out a series of pricing related questions from a webinar that took place earlier in the year entitled How to Avoid Heavy Discounting. Enjoy. So we got pricing surgery, and where we answer your pricing questions, and everyone who knows me, I'm a bit cheesy, so there we go. Joined by our Dr. Pricer, Rob here, where we answer your pricing questions. So the first question that we've got for you, and I think we've already answered one, so that's great. And this is a good opportunity for any of the listeners, if you do want to throw any more questions in the comments section of your Zoom invite, please do at this stage, and we'll do our best to answer them. So the first question: how can I identify candidates to discount?
All right. This is I'm going to answer this from a pricing perspective, I think, rather than from a business perspective in general, because one of those I can talk about with some confidence, and the other I'm likely to get wrong. So for me, when it comes to kind of understanding your inventory and where to change price, whether up or down or discount, you need to layer in your data sets to get a really good understanding of how your inventory behaves. So you need to work out whether you can look at your sales history. That will tell you whether there's actually demand in the marketplace for the product or not, and that's usually a good starting point, because what we tend to find at BlackCurve, kind of heavy discounting aside, but in general, that looking at the sales history and working out where we can increase and decrease price is actually a very good starting point, and there's a lot of gains to be made there. So if you drop your price by a few percentage points, you may kind of trip over a competitor that you didn't realize was there or couldn't see, or crop up in some algorithm, and that might skyrocket your sales for that item. So realistically, it's about understanding your marketplace, put your data sets together, and then segmentation of, well, this stuff is doing well, I can leave that alone. This stuff is struggling, or this stuff I need to get out of the warehouse or whatever, and then targeting in that way, and then using the competitive data in the marketplace to and the sales to understand what strategy you can apply or how much you might have to discount by.
Yeah, and I think just to add, I mean, I really treat it as a bit like a kind of, what would you do in a kind of Black Friday type event to a certain extent. You've got to make sure that you're looking at the right data and you're making strategic decisions, and you've got to make sure you're using the right data. So there's to inform your decisions, there's case studies that I've been involved in. Does the last few months justify decisions to discount? So if you've, one of the areas you might want to look at is what products were maybe performing poorly before the lockdown, and that might be, well, actually, that we need to lower the price, for example, of those particular products, because we are starting to exit, and if you are starting to see an uptick in sales from what was from the last few months, that might be an indication to say, well, actually, now I can start using pre-lockdown data to support my decisions. Okay, was there a question there I saw pop up?
Yeah, there
Rob?
is, and it's: do you see customer reaction to fluid pricing as a barrier? I.e., I bought this yesterday for X, and now it's Y pounds cheaper, more expensive. The short answer is yes, absolutely. So we try really hard to ensure that there isn't any kind of, for want of a better term, cognitive dissonance, but like annoyance in that customer user journey. We tend not to do intraday or often even daily price changes, rather than kind of, we've actually done a whole podcast on this, but work through a weekly cycle on average, because that way, if I go and look at something, I can go away, make a buying decision, come back, and it's still the same price. It hasn't moved by 10% or 5%. So yes, absolutely, Mark. It can be a real barrier.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You start to get into the law of diminishing returns as well, and that's probably because you can go so far and annoy the customer, as you mentioned there, Rob. So on average, if we look at all the data that we've had the fortune to see, including people's long tail, businesses are changing price on average one month between price changes. So their core products, absolutely, they might be changing them day to week. But actually, we find the sweet spot, plus or minus across everybody's data, is about a week between price changes, and that sort of seems to support the hypothesis that
there's a whole host of technical reasons for that as well. In that it's quite common for industries to have quite severe weekly demand cycles. So people tend to buy a lot at the weekend or a Monday, and then it dips down into Wednesday and picks up again, for example. So if you were to price intra-week too dynamically, you'd actually be you'd have a kind of a weird pricing pattern where it's actually cheaper to buy on a Wednesday than a Monday, which from a consumer perspective, it is kind of a weird behavior to enforce.
Yeah, and the other thing, I suppose, from the boring data science point of view, if you're not selling enough to work out whether that price point is correct, right? You need it to bed in for a period of time before you can make a decision with statistical certainty. So don't worry, listeners, it's not going to be a maths lesson, but that's one of the reasons why you need to.
I'd like to see that.
You're a bit biased though on that front. So great. So one of the I think this is, we won't spend too long on this because this is like a massive topic in itself, right? And to be honest, one of the reasons I founded BlackCurve was to support businesses to avoid this. So maybe with a ring fence in time there, Rob, how do I avoid a price war?
Oh, it's hard at the minute. The real challenge at the minute is it's not just people trying to shift stock, it's companies liquidating, like the Forbes article mentioned, and then auditors trying to realize any value that they can at all. And that can be incredibly damaging to the marketplace. The simple wrong short answer is to try and hold your nerve if you can, because that the price in the price war is not set by the consumer, right? That's the key piece. It's a vicious behavior that the vendors get into, and it drives the market down. So if you can afford to hold your nerve, and you do, but it's not something that's like easy answered in a minute, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to add to that, this is the importance of bringing in the other data sets. So if you're just looking at competitor data in isolation, it sort of lends itself for a downward spiral sometimes. And absolutely, I mean, our analysis has shown that on average, you need to make, where you have a competitor overlap, we would maintain parity with a competitor about 48% of the time. So really, it's saying that you should use the other data sets to help you with the other 52%. And in this lockdown phase, actually, we've seen less reliance on the competitor data. But I mean, it still is early days, right? We've only just starting to exit lockdown, and so so time will tell as to what. But I think it's, if you can hold your nerve and use the other data sets, you'll be at a better advantage. But we'll definitely have to do a more detailed view on this one to do that one particular question justice. So how do I know if I've discounted too deeply?
All your stock's gone.
Right.
No, I think it's you have to be. That's a bit facetious. You have to be playful, or at least experiment with it. In the if we take the case where you can continuously access stock. Let's say that. Then you want to. That you'll be able to tune your price and to maximize profit, right? So this is the classic price elasticity thing. You kind of do some pricing experiments, you step up a range, and then you'll find out the point that maximizes profit. So if you're someone that can get a continuous supply of stock, it should be completely demand driven. If you're in a more seasonal business, you should be looking at how close you are to your sell-through date. So if you're trying to either sell out or drop to a certain level, against the kind of period. If you're getting to a significant amount of time before that and you're out of stock or you've hit your target, well, the chances are you've been selling too cheaply. So I don't know if it's a follow-on question but to avoid that, it's what we said. You need to continually project when your stock levels are going to drop to the required level and adjust the price accordingly to try and either pick it up or push it down, so you make sure that you hit that date.
Thank you, Rob. And next question is, if I've over discounted, can I correct?
Yeah, I think I jumped the gun a little bit. Yes, absolutely. Just how I said, you just use your price to tweak the rate at which you're selling out.
Yes, I think this comes back to one of the earlier questions, that it's about maintaining your discount strategy over the coming weeks, months, years even, and don't be afraid to revert the price sooner. And also, just because you've put something into a discount, even if you've done all the exceptions and put it into a whole discounting strategy, if it's selling really well, don't be afraid to think, do you know what, actually I don't need to discount this product anymore. So I think people, a lot of retailers that we talk to are sort of worried about, well, I've promised this discount. Well, if you've had it and it's performing, you are in control of these prices, so you can also decide to remove it from your discounting promotion. So don't worry about that one. How deep should each discounting level go? So 70%, 50%, is there a rule?
So this is where I have a bit of a mental disconnect with people in practice, because I'm a data scientist by background, and I don't like making big moves, because I like to kind of move and listen. So when we do this stuff from the sales side, we move in terms of percentage, single percents, not tens of percents, because that lets us tune exactly where we need to be. So if, like Mark was saying earlier, how do I ensure that I'm maximizing the margin that I'm getting at the rate I want to go to? So I like small steps, but if you take people from other center, the realities of it often that you have to make larger ones, but I would rather make smaller ones, I guess is that's not a very good answer, but
I think there's strategic decisions that you make with marketing, right, which might be deeper to get the eyeballs, to get the footfall, but then yeah, there's this throttling effect on the other products. Was there a couple of questions there, Rob? You got those up to hand?
Yeah, we've got one from Roxana, which is it a good strategy to always be within a certain percentage range from Amazon prices? I'll give two answers. I'll give a broad brushstrokes one, and then I'll give a more detailed one. The broad brushstroke one is probably, because it's probably a good representation of the marketplace. The thing I'd encourage is to look at your inventory and work out what sells well regardless, even if it is overpriced and relative to Amazon price, and what doesn't, because what we've discovered when looking at any kind of range of competitors is that some products will be absolutely driven by price, and those you will have to probably match Amazon, or at least be within range of, depending on how you want to position your brand. But there'll be some products where the demand is completely different. You may own the PPC market on it, for example. You may own the advertising on it, so people only know to come through you. But by and large, you tend to need to be within a range, I guess.
Yeah, because there's certain bread and butter products that people don't care on Amazon. They're literally just the top line. If that's the cheapest, I'm going to buy it, and you've got to win that buy box. Whereas there are other products where people are doing more research on, and they might scroll down. So that's what Rob referred to, of looking at your data, work out what sells well, and you've got to work out which products you do need to do parity on, and that's something which we strongly need to work out very rapidly in the early days when a customer comes on board with BlackCurve. And as I said, the average is about, where you have an overlap with your competitor, is about 48% times you need to maintain parity. And you've got to remember that parity is not necessarily matching. Parity can be being a percentage higher, or we generally don't encourage you to go lower. You don't, you don't win anything by being the cheapest, right? Okay, so you can be a lowest match if that makes sense for you, but we're always trying to encourage the increase of prices. That's
And it is worth saying that things like the buy box, or whether on Amazon or through Google Shopping rankings, do look at relative prices and do take into account the fact that you have to be unfortunately they won't tell us where you need to be exactly, but we can kind of get an inkling that you do need to be within some range of it for that whole listening ecosystem to pick up on your product set and kind of optimize that for you.
It is interesting. It's not just price on the Amazon as well. So the Amazon buy box is powered by a number of things, right? So in terms of like your ratings and they haven't told all the data sets, but you've got to test and learn. You've got to call out to the market, see what happens. Call out to Amazon, see what happens, and monitor the reaction. Okay. Was there another question there, Rob? I see, or did I?
It's a more difficult one, actually. It's how do I keep an eye on margin return while concentrating on headline discounting? And that really is a challenge, and not one that I can really give you a broad brushstrokes answer on. It's because it's really about balancing demand factors. I think the first question and where I might get wrong, and if I do get wrong, I apologize, is that is what the idea or what you're trying to drive with headline discounting. Because if headline discounting as a strategy works in terms of driving up profitability just through selling volume, then that kind of wins out, unsurprisingly. But really, you need to be running the analytics or running the maths in the background to calculate which of your demand factors is, or whether it's maintaining margin, or whether it's if I drop a price. Hang on, let me answer this better. Basically, from a pricing perspective, you can tune the price and you can test it, and that will tell you whether whether making these headline discounts is effective for that product or not. Strategically, I will have to kind of put my hands up and say that is not. I'm a data scientist. I don't run an e-commerce business, so I can inform through the data, but I wouldn't want to kind of say yes or no, if that makes sense. I'm dodging the question a bit, Philip, but
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it'd be great if we could maybe take this particular question offline, and we're delighted to do some more research and come back to you with an informed answer. I mean, certainly from my point of view, there's the question of what's your worry? Are you worried about average margin, or are you worried about business profitability at the end of it? Okay, so you can go away increasing if you can get away with increasing the margin of your products and your overall profitability goes up, happy days. If what the data tells you that actually you take a hit on average margin of products and your overall profitability goes up, then the law of those numbers suggests that's the way to go. So there's a couple of mechanics, and it's probably to do with your particular business context that would support that. Because obviously you've got to consider what's my brand. Do I consider myself a premium brand or an alternative? So I'm not sure if that answers your particular question, but delighted to take that one offline. Was there any others on the chat there? Did I see any others at all? Okay, cool. So the other question. So don't worry, we're nearly at the end of these. The ones that were submitted prior to this particular webinar. So what should I do if my competitors are heavily discounting?
Okay, cool. Mark has followed up. So yeah, it'd be useful to have a conversation probably outside of this. But I agree, it's a really clearly from my lack of good explanation, you can tell it's a tough one. What should I do? This is it's analogous. It's the same as the price war question, really. I think we kind of covered that in that you need to look at your inventory. You need to work out whether you need to price match or not. And if you do need to price match, whether you want to be holding those products or not, whether it makes sense for your business. And you do that by looking at your, overlaying your data sets, what your competitors are doing, how much you're selling, how much stock you get through, blah, blah, blah. All of that good stuff.
Okay, and I think this is the last question, and before we put it to final orders of the listeners. I've been doing well during lockdown. Should I still discount?
You like keeping the hard ones, don't you? The real answer, I don't think you should. I think you should always discount with the reason.
Agreed.
And I would say that we've gone through quite a large market change going into lockdown, and we will go through quite a large market change coming out of lockdown. And on some products you probably will need to discount, because as the market changes, demand changes, and if demand changes, you'll need to discount. I would say I'd be wary of just cutting prices arbitrarily, because it's the easiest way to throw margin away. But there'll be some products you have to discount on, and some that you can maintain.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Don't if you're doing well, clearly your strategy's working. Clearly, everything else is working. That your marketing piece is working to get eyeballs to your store, and if you've got bricks and mortar when it opens, footfall to your store. So keep doing what you're doing and optimize from there. But I think if you were to answer that simply, if you're doing well, no, you might not need to. But then the market changes, the market shifts, and so forth and so forth. So you need to keep monitoring the situation and monitor your data sets. And there we go. You've been listening to questions from the archive of an earlier webinar entitled How to Avoid Heavy Discounting. We hope you found the answers to those pricing related questions insightful and enjoyable. We're BlackCurve. We help e-commerce businesses make pricing decisions. This is eCommerce Matters, and do subscribe in various podcast media outlets. Take care. See you next time.